Welcome to Gentle Calm. Some people live with a hard-to-name feeling that nothing in their life has fully taken hold. Their routines do not feel anchored, and their choices do not feel inhabited. Even the shape of the day can feel lightly placed, as if everything could be lifted and rearranged. From the outside, this may not look unusual. A person can be responsible, productive, and outwardly stable while privately feeling that very little has inner weight. They may have work, relationships, habits, and plans. They may even be making progress, but none of it feels settled in the deeper sense. What they are often missing is not motion. It is residence. Residence is the feeling that you are not merely passing through your own life, but actually living in it. A lot of people do not feel that. They feel more like temporary occupants who keep the structure standing without relaxing inside it. They show up, manage things, and remain slightly packed in their own mind. Some part of them stays braced, even when there is no obvious threat. That kind of rootlessness is exhausting because it is so hard to explain. You can point to pieces of your life and admit they are real and still feel unarrived inside them. You can live in the same city for years and still feel unplaced. You can repeat the same routine for months and still feel like you are improvising. You can care about people deeply and still feel as though part of you is standing just outside the relationship. When that happens, most people assume the problem is external. They think they just have not found the right place, the right work, or the right arrangement of life. So they keep adjusting the visible pieces, hoping one more change will make everything feel solid. Sometimes those changes matter, because environment does matter. But sometimes the deeper issue is not that life keeps shifting. Sometimes the deeper issue is that nothing is being allowed to sink in. That is a different problem altogether. It means a person can build, choose, commit, and improve while still feeling strangely ungrounded. The issue is no longer only what surrounds them. The issue is how they have learned to stand inside experience itself. Many people learned early that stability was unreliable. Not always in dramatic ways, but in repeated ones. Sometimes it was tension in the home that made full relaxation impossible. Sometimes it was emotional inconsistency that taught the body to stay alert. Sometimes it was the feeling that circumstances could turn at any moment. When that happens often enough, a person becomes highly adaptable, and adaptability can look like strength. It can make you perceptive, capable, quick, and difficult to knock over on the surface. But it can also create a hidden cost. You get so good at adjusting that you stop knowing how to settle. You know how to keep moving, but letting something become part of you may feel much harder. Remaining inwardly is a different skill from surviving outwardly. Rootedness requires a kind of trust that survival patterns do not easily permit. To become rooted, you have to stop hovering over your own life. You have to stop relating to each season as though it may vanish before you can lean on it. You have to let ordinary things acquire weight. That sounds small, but it is not small. A person who cannot do this often lives in a constant state of provisionality. Their schedule feels provisional, their self-understanding feels provisional, and even their commitments feel provisional. Sometimes, even their values feel provisional, not because they are false, but because little has been allowed to settle into structure. So they move through the day without ballast. Ballast is what gives a structure steadiness against unnecessary drift. Without it, a life can still function, but it will not feel grounded. That is why rootlessness often feels like a lack of internal grip. You wake up and the day has no floor. You complete things, but they do not register. You make plans, but they remain conceptual instead of lived. This can make a person feel chronically in between identities, in between chapters, and in between versions of self. After a while, that becomes more than a feeling. It becomes a worldview. You begin to interpret everything through the language of transition. This is just a phase. This is temporary. This is not the settled version yet. At first, that may even be true. The problem is that for many people, temporary stops being a description and becomes the organizing principle. Nothing is granted permanence, and nothing is allowed to become foundational. This is why some people can spend years improving their life while still feeling internally unplaced. They may be building something real, but because nothing is being emotionally received, the life they are building never converts into inner solidity. It remains informational instead of structural. They know what their life consists of, but they do not feel built into it. That gap creates a very specific kind of loneliness. Not only loneliness with other people, but loneliness with your own existence. You can be surrounded by the materials of a life and still feel as though you are standing in the hallway of it. That feeling often drives people into more effort. They assume they need a better system, a stronger identity, or a more convincing purpose. So they keep trying to generate solidity through force. But rootedness does not usually arrive through force. It arrives through contact. Contact with repetition, place, responsibility, and the ordinary texture of life. Many people struggle with that because staying with the ordinary can feel vulnerable in ways they do not expect. To let something become ordinary is to let it matter. It is to stop treating it like a test run. It is to admit that this may actually be your life and not merely a draft of it. That admission can be unsettling. Because if this is your life, it is no longer protected by abstraction. It is here, with its imperfections, repetitions, compromises, and actual demands. Many people find that harder than they would like to admit. They do not only want a life that works. They want a life that feels internally convincing. They want to feel the floor under it. But if you have spent years surviving by staying mentally mobile and emotionally ready to detach, depth can feel unfamiliar even when you want it. You may be more practiced in mobility than residence. Mobility says keep options open, stay ready to adapt, and do not rest your full weight here. Residence says remain, repeat, tend, inhabit, and let meaning gather. Those are very different inner postures. A lot of people are trying to create a rooted life while unconsciously operating from the posture of mobility. So even good things stay strangely thin. A habit remains mechanical instead of comforting. A home remains functional instead of lived in. And a relationship remains important but not entirely restful. Work remains something to manage rather than something connected to an inner center of gravity. Sometimes what is missing is not another piece of life. Sometimes what is missing is permission to stay inside the life already here. The problem is not always absence. Sometimes it is non-attachment mistaken for clarity. A person thinks they are being realistic, flexible, or self-aware while quietly refusing to sink in too deeply. Some people do not only fear instability. They also fear the ordinariness of actual rootedness. Because rootedness is rarely dramatic. It is often repetitive, modest, and almost unspectacular. It looks like returning to the same desk, the same walk, the same kitchen, and allowing repetition to form an inner architecture. That can feel underwhelming to the part of us that keeps waiting for a big internal click. But a life is rarely built on clicks. It is built on accumulated contact. Rootedness is not an event. It is an accrual. It forms when you stop treating every part of life like a potential exit point and let a place, a rhythm, or a responsibility work on you long enough to leave a mark. So the question becomes more intimate than people expect. Where am I refusing contact? And where am I still keeping my own life at arm's length? That might be a city you refuse to emotionally claim, a routine you perform without letting it shape you, or relationships you care about but never fully rest inside. It might also be a quieter refusal to let ordinary life count because it does not resemble your ideal picture. Once you see that pattern, the work changes. The work is no longer only to find the perfect life structure, but to stay in contact long enough for structure to become substance. That might mean letting your mornings, your room, your desk, or your walk acquire a little more ritual weight. Not performance, weight. You may not need a whole new life. You may need to stop treating your current life as though it is made of erasable pencil marks and let some lines darken. Human beings need patterns they can return to, places where attention has been invested long enough for memory to gather. That continuity is one of the deepest forms of relief. A rooted life does not remove pain, but it gives you somewhere inward to stand. Little by little, the floor appears because you stop hovering above the life that is already yours. If this reflection met something true in you, subscribe to Gentle Calm, and tell me in the comments what part of your life still feels strangely temporary, even though it has been yours for a long time. Thank you, and stay calm.